Bonsoir tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Dorvil. In continuation with our series on mental health within the Haitian community, we would like to have a conversation on parenting. The goal of this symposium is to discuss parenting practices within the Haitian community and our greater Caribbean family. Also, to expand on healthy and unhealthy discipline practices and to provide parents with different strategies and intervention to support their children. Ça, c'est un sujet qui est vraiment important pour moi parce que en communauté haïtienne, nan, moi, un pile, um, moun fait un peu de session sous sujet ça. Il est vraiment important pour nous capables d'aider, pour nous encadrer ti moun yo, pour nous aider à grandir, pour nous devenir bons citoyens, qui gens pour nous élever, yo, gens nous parler avec eux, qui en forme de support que yo besoin dans maintenant. Pour nous capables, in order to discuss this topic further, I have our panelists here with us today. Um, Ellianna Dorvil. Brian, who's also our other panelist, is running late, but he'll be joining us shortly. But before I open the mic to Eliana, I wanted to take a moment to thank the MAP organizers and our partners, College Cafe. Bonsoir, Eliana. Good afternoon. I can hear you. Eliana, the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. But before I do that, I want to take time to acknowledge the fathers today. Today is Father's Day. So I want to say Happy Father's Day to all of our listeners and those that joined in to partake in today's symposium. So a little bit about me. As Dr. Dorvil mentioned, my name is Ellianna. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of Florida. Um, I've been in the field for about 20 years now, working with individuals and family, providing a host of services, including counseling. Currently, I work at a nonprofit agency overseeing a shelter where we service individuals that are experiencing homelessness within the community.
Okay. Brian is still running late, so we'll get started without him in discussing this topic, and he'll join us um, shortly. So typically, when we talk about parenting, we think about the process of raising and educating a child from birth, um, or before or until adulthood. So, what are your experience with parenting practices um, in the Haitian community, I guess you could say, as well as the greater Caribbean community?
Well, absolutely. So I myself am of Caribbean heritage. So my family and myself migrated from Guyana a few years back, and I have 4 children myself that are of Haitian descent. So in my household, it's bicultural, but luckily we share very similar values in terms of the way that we raise our children. Because being from the Caribbean, there's some similarities in how we are reared and the things that we believe in terms of child discipline. Just helping our children to grow and develop into not only productive adults, but also adults that are very conscientious of who they are and have strong personalities
Mhm.
and self-confidence. Um, when it comes to raising children, particularly in a host country, there are many, many challenges that you often face. Because again, I was raised with a different mentality. My parents, both being Guyanese, did not subscribe to some of the things that are here in the host country. Back home, we do believe in discipline, whether that's physical discipline. Our parents, I didn't come from a household where every day my parents would say, I love you. The demonstration of love was through the provision of shelter, food, making sure that all of my basic needs were met. That's how my parents demonstrated love. And I felt that. I didn't necessarily hear it, but I felt it, and I knew that my parents cared for me by the things in which they did to ensure that I had a good life. In raising my own children here in America, um, my husband and I, we take from what our parents, the foundation that our parents presented to us, and we elaborate or build upon that with the things that we have learned, right? So, like I mentioned, I
Yeah.
did not hear "I love you" every single day, but I know for myself that's important for a child to know and for a child to hear. So that is something that we have added to, our repertoire, if you may say, in terms of how we raise our children. We definitely still subscribe to what how we were raised, but we added some different things to help improve communication, ensure that they were, emotionally they felt safe and secure and loved, but also supported, understanding that there's clear boundaries. I'm not your
And
friend,
that
I'm your
exactly
parent. That
often
is
in within Haitian families, that's something that I feel is so there's the boundaries are blurred, completely blurred. And oftentimes when you try to set as a child, or even an adult, first of all, you are not allowed the space to become an adult. And I do not want to generalize to say in every family, but that's often what I've noticed. The space to be an adult is not allowed. Ou toujours timon, timon. No matter how old you are, ou toujours timon, timon na. Um, so then when you start or try to establish a boundary, then you become mal élevé. But in trying to establish boundaries around myself, around other things, um, and that's often a source of conflict that I see in sessions, because in trying to assert yourself and individuate, I guess you could say, then
yeah,
yeah, then that becomes a rejection. I think if we're trying to process it to some degree, it's like a rejection they feel, but they don't understand how to
correct.
communicate that in a healthy way.
Yeah. Because I think again, and we're dealing with, we talk about intergenerational conflict, and that's exactly where you
Mhm.
see it, right? Because you
Yes.
have the young adult, you have the adolescent that wants to assert themselves. They want to um, establish their independence. Of course, as parents, you want that, but at the same time, there has to be clear boundaries. And
Mhm.
if that's not clear, you're going to have conflict. You're going to have individual. You're going to have this young person who wants to be an adult or independent, but then you also have the parents who, not for anything, but they have the wisdom and they know, what the world entails. They know some of the, they want to protect you in a sense. That's exactly what it is. They want to protect you, and they exert their control, the control as a means to kind of protect you or keep you safe. But there has to be there has to be a level of respect there to understand where you give and where you kind of take, and that's often lost when it comes to raising children in this society, in this culture.
Yeah, and also too, one thing that I've noticed as well is that as you become an adolescent, as children they grow up, um, they start to adapt to the norms of the host country more, right? And sometimes the parents may be feeling that they might be losing control or whatnot, but who also have greater linkage to the culture of origin. And so then you have this fight and and that often you see
Yeah,
that tension because part of it, that's one part of it, but also the other part of it is too sometimes the child is so parentified because
correct.
maybe barriers or lack of acculturation and whatnot, whatever the reason might be,
Yeah,
um, then that too create more problems.
Correct. And I wanna expand on two of the things that you just mentioned. The first thing being kind of, the parents having a stronger linkage to the home country, right? Um,
Hmm.
when we look at different generations that are here in the States, we can definitely see and we understand that parents definitely have a stronger linkage to their family. But I think a part of the conflict that kind of starts to brew is the parents feeling as though sometimes the children are disconnecting from their culture.
Yes,
And
yes,
I think as a way to kind of reinforce that they exert they overcompensate in a sense. They
yes.
exert more
Mhm.
authority because they want to make sure that their children are, not joining or forgetting where they came from, but they are still connected and aligned with their heritage, and that causes a lot of issues. The other thing
Mhm.
that you mentioned is conflict kind of brewing out of children being parentified. That happens time and time again. Children are more adaptable when they go into newer cultures, right? Children are able to come to go anywhere and quickly adapt because they're exposed a lot more than their parents may be. And when that happens, you have children that are almost stepping in the gap for parents who may not understand the system. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I remember migrating here. I grew to learn the culture faster than my mother did. So a lot of the things that needed to be relayed to my parents, she may not have understood because there was a disconnect there. And of course, she's older. So, there was kind of limited aptitude in learning that. So I had to kind of, okay, so this is what it is, this is how things are done, mom. And that alone kind of shifts the power because parents are used to being the one that know it all, the one that does it all. And then you have your child telling you, because they're in school, they're socializing with peers. So they're learning and they're picking up the culture a lot faster. And parents are now having to kind of catch up. That can cause a lot of tension in a family when you realize as a parent that you're losing that control, that they're now bringing information to you versus you
Mhm.
giving information to them, and also when you feel as though they're pulling away from their culture.
Yeah. Um, I I think Brian is still. I saw his name flash, so I'm not sure if he joined us yet. Um, but so in continuation with that, then, so what do you see as some of the issues arising with regards to child rearing and developing and growing? I guess you could say a human being
Yeah.
in a host country.
Well, I think we already know what some of the challenges with that because there's a shift in power dynamics. So with that, you have children feeling as though they know more, they're more independent. So they may feel like they're the adult. They may feel as though they know more than their parents and they have that level of control. But how do we remedy that? How do we support parents so that they can continue to be parents ultimately? Because as grown as an adolescent or a young adult may think that they are, they still need the wisdom of their parents to be able to navigate through life.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit of technical issues. Give me one
Yes,
second.
you, Ellie. I think we've lost Ellie for a moment. I'm going to switch to Creole since Ellie doesn't speak Creole. So our other host, we who does speak Creole, we're going to have more discussion in Creole about some of the parenting stuff. But um, toujou ap tan li li pou ko vini. Men sa nou tap pale de li pandan Eliana perdi koneksyon. So, yon nan problem ki nou wè an pil. Um, se ke pandan ti moun an yap grandi nan yon peyi ki pa peyi orijin yo, ki pa peyi orijin paran, gen yon pil tansyon ki genyen nan ti moun ap grandi paske li plus vin adapte la kultur kote li a viv la. Pendant se tan paran yo, y ap eleve ti moun yo avèk prinsip peyi orijin yo a. An pil fwa a koz de mank de komprehensyon ki jan ti moun devlope en jeneral, um, paran santi yon sens ki la pedi kontrol de ti moun nan ki ti moun nan sanse ap rejte kultur orijin yo a. Sa vin kreye an pil tansyon an nan fami nan, pil tansyon paske paran ka pa konen ki jan pou reagi nan situasyon sa yo. So, se de sa nou tap pale. Bonjour. Bonsoir, Brian.
Bonsoir, bonsoir, sak pase?
Nou la. Merci desko ka vini, desko ka ven nou apremidi an. Bonne fête de paix.
Oh, merci beaucoup, et puis, pardon, mwen, peut-être mwen yon ti jan reta, même là, grâce à Dieu.
Merci. Merci. I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Ellianna, we've been conversating around in terms of her experience with parenting practices within the Haitian family and Caribbean family as she's Guyanese, with raising, I guess, bicultural children. And also, we were talking about as well in terms of growing up children and having them adapting more to the norms of the host country, and the parents maintaining the practices, the cultural practices of the culture of origin, and how that sometimes create tension within the family. Just to as a recap of what we've been talking about.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, audience la, se pi fò kreol nap pale ou si mwen anglais tou?
Na fe yon mélange paske Eliana pa pale kreol, men m'pense
Ok.
ki yon seri suje m'pense li important pou nou fè yo pase an kreol pou audience ki pa pale anglais ap yo ka kompran tou.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay?
Bon, sa sot di la, sa se yon eksperyans mwen vwèman kompon et puis vwèman experience li. What Clay just mentioned, I personally can identify with that. There truly is a culture shock for that first generation that's raised in the States. And not only is it a culture shock for that first generation, it's also a culture shock for the parents. And I don't want to hog the floor, but I have lots that I would like to say. You
Go
know,
ahead. You can talk. has been has had a moment to talk a lot. I mean, and then some of the if we don't get through everything within our agenda for today, I think parenting is such a big topic that we might need a follow up to discuss some of the other the broader issues as well because it's so in depth, like so
yeah, it
involved
is. Yeah,
for
it is.
our community that it needs to. I don't know that an hour and a half is enough to even tackle the basic components.
Agreed. I guess my personal story. I'm a first generation raised in America. My parents from Haiti, my grandparents, my great grandparents, they're all from Haiti. Miragwan, Fort Blanc, Port-au-Prince. That's where my family's from, and I was raised in the inner city, Newark, New Jersey. But I think the same would apply for suburbs, but it'll be different in a sense. It's not as much aggression, I would think, in the suburbs compared to being reared in the inner city. And I remember this is a good story, so bear with me for a moment, right? I remember being in the fourth grade, right? And I was new to a school, and no, not even fourth, seventh grade. Seventh grade. Ooh, you know what it is? This happened more than once. That's what it is. It happened in the fourth grade and the seventh grade. So the first time this happened in the fourth grade, I go to a new school. Somebody said they didn't like me and just punched me in the face out of nowhere. Right? I
Mhm.
don't like you, and they hit me. Right? So I went home and I told my mother, I said, Mom, you won't believe that somebody punched me in the face, you know? And my mother was like, Qui ça fait? Like, what did you do to them? Like, who would punch you for no reason? Right? I said, Ma, I'm telling you, I did nothing to get punched. My mother didn't believe me, because culturally speaking, there's no way that you'll just
Mhm.
punch someone for no reason. You must have done something, you know.
Mhm.
So my mother, she didn't believe me. My grandmother didn't believe me. So very early on, I had to learn to fend for myself because of that cultural divide. And I didn't even have number one, they didn't believe me, and I at that time as a fourth grader, like 9 years old, I lacked the communication skills to be more convincing. You know, so fast forward. I think one of the things I definitely want to touch on too is we don't want our children to suffer in silence. Like that first generation or even second generation in America, we don't want them to suffer in silence. So what I mean by that is we want to encourage our children to be able to share their experiences with us, even choices that they've made, whether good or bad. You
Yeah.
know, whether they're innocent, whether they're guilty. As parents, is very, very important for us in the Haitian community and the Caribbean community for us to create an environment for our children to feel comfortable speaking to us about anything. Because what happens when they do not, they suffer in silence. And I'll
Mhm.
explain it. I'll give it a break version in Creole. Li très important pour nous-mêmes comme parents, pour nous faire yon situation pour ti moun, pour petit nou yo confortable, parler avec nous sous quelle n'importe situation yo ta arrivé dans vie yo. Même si même si yo bien fait
Mario
dans
Blanc.
situation, yeah, même si situation yo bon situation, même si yo pas tellement fait ça ou te supposé faire, li très important pour petit nou yo confortable parler avec nous si nous pas voulons petit nou yo souffrir en silence. Peut-être a fait souffrir en silence là. Génération ça, yo pas même bagaille, tant que génération pas nous. Même si nous pas tellement remet par nous, yo gen on se de respect, n'a pas obligé ba yo, right? That's my generation and up.
Mhm.
Regardless what, we respect our parents, period. You know what I mean? Whether we like you, love you, we respect you. This
Mhm.
new generation, very, very different. Yo,
Yes.
très sensitive.
C'est
Very
fragile.
sensitive.
Vraiment, vraiment
Yes.
fragile.
They struggle with taking criticism. They they
Yeah.
they really struggle with accepting even if it's constructive.
Mhm.
They want everything right now, correct the
Yeah.
first time, like in Google. Like they want to Google, here's how my parents should act. And you just be like that. So it's very important for us as parents to create an environment where our children feel comfortable discuter quelle pas ça vous voulez discuter avec nous.
Yeah,
Peut-être si nous.
one of
Mhm,
the
you got it.
things that Ellie and I were talking about prior to you signing on was the blurred boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know what your experience been with that, but there's a lot of issues around that, and the parentifying the child as a first generation. I mean, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with that, and the moment you start to establish boundaries, being called mal élevé.
That's it. Ou pas gain respect,
Mal élevé, but it's healthy for a child to be able to do that pour yo ka créer commencer à créer limite vers tout moun envers tête yo envers l'autre monde mais si ti moun nan djou li sonje an pil moun ki te la yo yo pa reme pou kote le parent fè al embrasser tout moun moun nan yo pa konen moun nan yo pa reme pou al embrasser just
Mhm.
saluer just if you just saluer ça va bon. But the thing with that is the child is starting to establishing boundaries around themselves. Il y a créé limite pour être pas yo. Mais
Mm-hmm.
mais nous décourager ça. Ou ka traiter mon avec respect, pendant en même temps tout créer limite. Parce qu'il est important pour tout le monde, depuis tout petit, pour commencer à prendre limite. Ça nous les boundaries.
Hmm. Or espace personnel, you
Yeah,
know.
espace personnel. Parce que si on moun ta vini ta fait li yon bagay ki mal, puis je la connais ça, ok, li pas bon pour ka di nan espace personnel mwen pou pa envahi sa.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, d'accord.
Um,
Yeah,
guys
hmm.
wanna expand on that a little bit?
I would love to expand as long as someone translate or summarize what you guys just said.
No, no, I'm sorry. No, we're talking about I was recapping for Brian about boundaries, like that
Mhm.
like we were talking about that, and that sometimes um as children we're told to go like, when you see everybody you go hug and kiss them regardless if you know them or you like them or whatnot, you have to go and do that.
Yeah,
um but if a child say no, we don't even ask. We don't even. You're supposed to do that, but without providing context or anything around that, because
hmm
the child may not feel comfortable. So it's important to start at that age. The child's trying to insert boundaries around their personal space, around
right,
themselves. But we discourage those things sometimes.
right. No, absolutely. Again, I think one of the themes in the conversation that we've been discussing is control, right? Parents having or needing to retain that control that they have. And it's kind of like, do as I say, don't ask me any type of questions, just follow my directions. But we, being here, we are now learning in, whether it's through our field or just kind of seeing, healthier ways to parent children, we're learning that if a child is hesitant or a child says no, that we have to kind of be cognizant of that and allow them to, establish boundaries. We're teaching them ways in which, they need to establish boundaries because that's going to set them up for adulthood. But it can be a challenge because, again, you don't want to be described as, I didn't understand the full translation, but I gather what Brian was saying, that if you talk back to your parents, that you're being labeled as like this bad child, this defiant child. And no one wants that, right? You want to be respectful and you want to follow your parents' directions, but we as parents, we have to learn how to be a little bit flexible, how to allow them to develop, how to um, provide a healthy space for them to learn boundaries, for them to be autonomous. Of course, still being very mindful and parenting them, but we have to allow room for them to grow.
Agree. Okay, looks
I
like
think
we lost Dr. Dorvil.
Yeah.
I'm assuming she'll be back. Yeah, I totally agree. It's important for us to allow.
excuse me, sorry.
No problem.
I was kicked out as well. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's important for us to allow our children to have their own identities. To have their own identities, and it's a lot easier said than done because we don't want our children to make poor choices. But that's how you become an adult. Through making good
Yeah.
choices, poor choices, and we need to be a supportive enough community to help them. Li
And
trez important pou nou kite pitit nou yo gen identity pa yo. Poutet yo chak ap swazi yon identity poutet pa yo, li trez important pou nou sipote sa.
pour nous capables de comprendre tout que yo yon individu séparé de nous. Choix pa yo, pas vle dire c'est choix pas nous. Parce que ça me trouvait que nous tellement entangled, nous enmeshed, nous tellement collés que nous oublions choix petit pas nous, pas vle dire c'est choix pas nous. Que ça petit
Mhm.
moins fait, ça c'est un reflet de moi-même. So, ce qui est le bon, qui est le pas bon, m'obliger à attacher là moi-même. Our choices, we're so enmeshed and entangled, Ellie, that sometimes we forget our children, they're individuals. Their choices are not our choices. We're not responsible for their choices. And we forget that. And so that becomes a source of anxiety for us because we're so consumed by that and refuse to allow them to grow into individual human beings with their own identity outside of us.
No, absolutely. But like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of what our parents do, trying to maintain a level of control is really rooted in their desire to protect, right?
Mhm.
Their
Exactly.
demonstration of
Yes.
they know no other way to protect us, and particularly migrating to this country. You're in an environment where, as an adult, you don't know what's going on, right? And then here you are giving your children to the world, and they're unprotected, and you don't have
Mhm.
the utility, the armory, or like Brian said, you may not have the communication skills in order to defend your children. So how
Yeah.
else do you protect them? By kind of tightening the harness a little bit, right? And it's not healthy, but I
Mhm.
think from my own experience, I think what my parents demonstrated was their way of trying to protect me, not understanding that in doing that they limited me in certain ways.
Mhm. Well, one of the thing, because like I'm trying to be mindful of time, that I really want us to get into is not only so there's the issue of the lack of awareness around developmental stages, right? And so that's one fold, and then trauma and transgenerational trauma and how
Yeah.
those influence how parents show up within the dynamic, right? And then also the third fold is the practices that we use to maintain that control, disciplining, um,
Hmm.
especially like the wigwas and stuff like that.
Ooh, Martinette.
Yes, Martinet. But because I know it's multifold, but so ça, yo, ça me devle pour nous capable discuter tout c'est un pile fois en tant que parent nous capable de connaissance là sou staj devlopman yo, ki jan ti moun nan evolue le yo ti kat kat pou jiska sk yo rive yon gran moun. Ki staj devlopman yo, men osi ki jan trauma, paske an pil nan nou soufri trauma, ke nou admet li, e ok men nou men konsyen de sa. E ki jan sa yo afekte jan nou men nou parente petit yo. Okay? So,
Well, yeah. So Dr. Dorvil mentioned trauma, and I think we should try to define what trauma
mhm,
is. Trauma is any overwhelmingly strong emotional or mental experience that a person goes through. You know, if it's
mhm,
overwhelmingly stressful, if it's filled with very strong emotions, then it's traumatic. You know, and with trauma, there's certain responses that gets triggered. And to explain that in Creole, so Saki trauma, trauma c'est qu'importe expérience qui très 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 agit sur monde là, qui très 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 stressful sur monde là, et puis em- emotionally, émotion, euh, personne là pas qu'à bien manager
chérie,
trauma.
you.
Yeah, yeah. So that's trauma, you know. Qu'importe expérience qui twop pour santé moun là, pour émotion moun là, petite là. Ça, c'est une expérience qui est traumatique
So, le nan pale de trauma, jan Brian di an nou ka, so, takou situasyon moun yo ap viv la dan yo. Haiti konya, moun bandi yo, bal, a doat a goch ti moun nan pa ka l'ekol, trauma seksuel, trauma fizik, tout bay sa yo, tout aspect sa yo fe pati de trauma. E an pil fwa, pa pose peuple la rendre kont yon seri bagay. Men konya m pose yo komanse a vin pi konsyen de sa yo, men gon mank d'edukasyon, de sensibilite envers suje sa yo.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was trauma we're referring to, Ellie.
Yeah.
And I think it's, thank you for defining that, because I think it's so important, Brian. But I think also what we have to kind of tackle and talk about as well is, I think in the Caribbean culture, just, the Black culture as a whole, we tend to minimize experiences that, when we look at other cultures, they would be labeled as trauma. But for us, I think sometimes we adopt this mentality that, oh, that's just it's normal. Yeah, someone yelling at you, that's okay. That's not a big deal. You're getting colic, that's not, it's okay. Like, that's just a part of the course. You're going to school and you're stressed. Why are you stressed? And we really need to get away from that, right? Because again, we're talking about someone's development, and when experience like that happen and they're not addressed and things are not resolved to the best that they can be, we're talking about living adults walking in life doing the same thing all over again because it was never addressed. There was no awareness about it. There was no insight. Nothing was learned in that experience. So what they're doing is they're replicating that from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And so it's really important. It's really important that, that it's defined what is trauma, but also that we talk about the illusion that people of our heritage do not experience trauma, because that can be farther from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, we become machines. We're automatized.
Yeah.
We react.
Dehumanized.
Right.
Yes. And that shows up in how we with that trauma reaction.
Hmm.
So the other part of that question in terms of discipline, Ellie, that I think I don't know if you caught that we were talking about is the regress. Brian, the regress or the matinee. So in terms of unhealthy discipline practices, I wanted us to talk a little bit about talk about that a bit.
Yeah. And I like to begin when we speak about discipline. You know, donc let let's say let's say
I think we lost Brian too.
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, bon. Laissez un Freddy, c'est pas boot short nous mettez sous nous, right? When it's the winter time, we don't wear shorts. If we're in our right mind, we're not going to go outside with shorts on, meaning we dress appropriately for the environment and for the situation, right? Like when it's time to go to a graduation, you're not going to wear jeans and sneakers. You're going to dress nicely, right? Donc, ou si ou gen yon graduation pou ale, ou pat mette yon boot short avec sapat sou, wap bien habillé ko, pou tete yon moun kap graduate, right? You're going to a graduation. It's the same thing with our disciplinary practices. What may be an acceptable practice in one community, in one place, is totally unacceptable somewhere else. Totally, totally unacceptable.
And
You,
also varies from child to child too. It
Yes, individual. Yes.
depends.
Yeah, it definitely does. You have no idea how many times my mother threatened to send me back to Haiti. Maintenant Haïti, oui, et puis y a pas, qui ça t'a fait? Et puis y a lavé tête tout dans yon la mer. They gonna wash your hand in the river or the lake, and that's gonna fix it. Like, just threats. But, to get back to the whole discipline thing too, I was beat with the matinet. And a matinet, it's like a piece of wood with like a little leather hook on the end so you can hang it up somewhere on a nail, right? And then it has like three leather whips. And I was beat with that thing, and I remember thinking like, c'est pas bête, moi, pour que ça maman bat me avec your martinet, right? Like, I'm not an animal. Why she beat me with something that looks like a horse whip? And you know something, my experience was very common. Like, my neighbors, they got it worse than me. Right? Like, trust and believe, they got it so bad with Zocalo. We have certain practices. Zocalo, you take your finger like this and you hit the child in the head. I mean, this is their brain, guys. Right?
Yeah,
So, from a cultural perspective, Zocalo, acceptable. From a cognitive, neurological perspective,
and
it's not
development.
really smart to hit your developmental. It's not really wise to hit your child in the head with a clenched knuckle. It's not really wise to do. You know.
Yeah. So I think too, before you speak, Ellie, um, is it goes back to that concept of trauma. It's the transgenerational trauma. So, and you can take that back all the way to slavery if we were to go there. So those practices that were done to us and
Yeah.
now we're doing to our kids, ça met yo, te kon fè nous-mêmes, ancêtre nous, en tant qu'esclaves, nous-mêmes qu'on y a n'a fait même bagay la, n'a fait ti petit nous yo même bagay la. Um, so, ancêtres nous goumen pour nous retirer net. Men nou retourne avec même concept là dans jan nous élever petit nous parce que nous pas jam adresse un pile nan problème ça yo. Nous pas soit nous pas conscient ou nous pas gen assez éducation vers sujet a, ou sinon nous pas m'vle kwe que c'est compréhension qui nous pas gen ou li que c'est um, que nous choisissons personnellement pour nous discipliner petit nous, même j'en mettre là, t'es comme discipliner esclave là, t'es traité au moins ce qui en est. Et parce que c'est même bagarre là, qu'on créé avec petit nous. Là.
Et gen lot fasyon pou nou kapwen kon len ap disiplin pitit nou yo, you know?
Mhm.
Poutet, bon, se pa yon afer pa jem disiplin pitit la. Yon pitit ki leve san disiplin. Ouh, gen la so yon, ke jon di monster. Yon monster, yap vini,
Cauchemar.
right?
Mais c'est job nous en tant que parents pour nous discipliner, pour nous guider, ti moun, c'est job que nous gagnons en tant que
Mm-hmm.
mais gen yon jan qui nous ka fait ça pour nous soutenir ti moun nan yon jan pour yo développer en tant que pour nous devenir un bon citoyen.
Mm-hmm. Gen yon bagay ki rele disiplin pozitiv.
Mhm.
Men yon ekzamp disiplin pozitiv, right? Donk si ou pase 3 joun nan l'ekol, san teacher ou bom yon mouve komunikasyon de jou l'ekol ou. Nan 3e jou a, map kite ou gade yon bagay sou internet ou map mene yon kote pou manje kom your reward. That's positive discipline, right? An example of positive discipline is, you have a child that okay, if I could get a good report from your teacher in 3 days, I'll let you go to your favorite place to eat, or I'll let you watch something on Netflix for extra time. That's positive discipline. You're encouraging a good behavior by rewarding the positive behavior. you know. And as a Haitian community, as Caribbean parents, period, positive discipline is something we need to practice much, much more. And the
Mhm.
thing with positive discipline, for positive discipline to work, it needs to be attainable, right? Meaning the goal that you're setting or the standard must be something the child can reach. Because if they can't reach it, what's the point? You know what I mean? So si wap pratique discipline positive, Kene pot bagay pozitiv wap ofri pitit la kom reward. Fol yon bagay pitit la ka fe, you know? Tok ou si ou konen pitit ou, pa ka ret tranquil pou 20 minutes, right? 3 jou 3 tan pou pitit la, right? So, let kon sa, okay, you say, you know what? Si ou ka fe inet tan nan klas la, son problem, Nap komanse avek sa, map bon yon sticker, right? Or map bon yon ice cream lel vin l'ekol, lel soti l'ekol, right? If so, in other words, if you know your child can't keep it together for 20 minutes, you can't wait 3 days to do positive discipline. If that's the case, okay. If you can keep it together for 1 hour in class today, when you get home, I'll let you get that ice cream you want. And that's not the child taking advantage of you. That is you building up the child's stamina for the positive behaviors. In other words, if you're going to practice positive discipline, it must be something that's attainable for the child. Otherwise, there's no point and the behavior won't be reinforced.
I'm glad you brought that in terms of the child taking advantage of you because I wanted to give Ellie an opportunity to talk a little bit about parenting style because I think that's something that I don't that we don't have enough understanding about
Right. Right.
um, in our community. Um, because oftentimes that's what they would say. Yeah, the child's taking advantage of you. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that, Ellie, and you too,
No,
Kevin.
thank you. And before I get into that, Claire, I wanted to go back to something that you guys were talking about earlier with the different forms of discipline that we experience, growing up. And we still see, back home, I still know that my cousins are still being disciplined the same way. I remember being young and not doing what my parents wanted me to do, and my mom telling me to go outside and pick a branch. And of course, trying to be smart, I would go and I'll pick the smallest one, not understanding that the smallest one has a recoil. So, I'm hoping she hit once, but it's hitting like 3 times. But I think with our parents, I think with us, when you know better, you do better, right? You talked
Exactly.
about kind of hitting the child in the head. In the Caribbean, there's not enough attention and education poured into the cognitive development of someone. So these things that they're doing, they're not mindful of the impact that it's going to have on the child's brain and the child's self-esteem. The only thing that they know, and this probably goes back to our heritage and being in slavery, is if you want someone to do something, you whip them and they'll do it. And unfortunately,
Mhm.
we have continued that practice on over and over and over again. And we really have to move towards the other side of the pendulum in terms of improving our communication with our children. One of the things that I really and my husband work really hard with our children on doing is having that open communication. Right. Now, that is not to say that, from time to time, my children do not get, I do not spank my children or, they're not Cali, but it's making sure that whatever they're being disciplined on, there's communication about that behavior. There's an understanding that that behavior is unacceptable. And our response to
And
them is not
why
first
this is
to
unacceptable
hit,
too.
it's not first to hit them. The response is first to say, okay, what you're doing is not correct. Do you understand why it's incorrect? Do you understand why I'm dissatisfied or disappointed with what you're doing? And engaging them in that dialogue because you want them to understand what is unacceptable about what they're doing so that they do not repeat that again. If I merely just hit them because they did something, there's no room for them to understand what just happened. The only thing they know is they did something and you hit me, but they don't understand why. There's no
Right.
explanation. I think we have to get away from the mentality that as parents, we do not have to explain ourselves to our children.
Mm.
We
Mhm.
have to reframe our thinking. It's not that you're explaining yourself to a child. You're you're educating your child on your perspective of what is acceptable and what's unacceptable. And in doing so, you're teaching them the thing that we talk to our clients about all the time, I statements, right? Because you move down the line and you're saying, I didn't like that you do this, and this is why I don't like it. This is how it made me
Mhm.
feel. And we were able to see the fruit of our labor when our children are able to express themselves, in engaging with their siblings, or they come home from school and you say, how was school? And they're like, oh, school was good because da 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 da. It's all about teaching them how to express themselves and not limiting it to just, you did something, I'm going to collar you or I'm going to spank you. We have to get away from that mentality. We have
Ellie,
to
let
move
me
to having more
translate.
open communication.
Let me translate for a second because I think it's very important what you just said about the expression, us feeling that we shouldn't explain to our children.
Yes, that's a
So
big point. Un
yes,
gros point.
yon point que Iliana fait qui me pense li vraiment important, c'est peut-être ça m'a traduit li en créole pour parents yo. C'est concept que nous pensons nous pas obligé expliquer tête nous à ti moun yo. Le ti moun an fait un bagay, nous parler avec, nous communiquer avec pour qui ça le fait à pas bon. Par contre, c'est pas que ti moun nan pas bon, c'est ça que action que yo fait à pas bon. Ça c'est numéro un. Deuxièmement, fait que nous communiquer avec eux, c'est pas nous-mêmes en tant qu'adultes qui gain pour nous expliquer tête nous. C'est parce que nous avons utilisé moment pour nous apprendre ti moun nan. Pour qui sa action que li fait li pas bon. Parce que nous avons tendance, c'est grand monde samedi, c'est ça. C'est ça m'éleve avec. Mais ça passait pour capable éduquer ti moun nan pour vraiment transformer, pour créer change que vous voulez, que vous cherchez. Parce que vous obligez chita pour communiquer avec ti moun nan, pour parler avec. Nous connaissons un peu nous peut-être nous pas gain opportunité ça là nous te ti moun, mais c'est peut-être ça qu'on y a nous-mêmes, c'est devoir nous pour nous essayer de créer une opportunité pour nous changer situation avec petit nous yo. Okay, Ali, back to
The
you.
other the other aspect I think that really helps to cultivate a positive parent-child relationship, aside from having that level of communication, is setting clear expectations and boundaries. And we talked about boundaries being very blurred. I think it's important to, in your communication, to let your children know, like Brian mentioned, this, here are my expectations of you, right? Here are my expectations and here are my aspirations for you. It's important to communicate that because a couple of reasons. You want to let your children know that you have very, very big goals and you have very big um, expectations of them, right? And it may not be that they're going to attain all of that, but you want to put it out there. You want to allow them to have that dialogue with you so that they can let you know. Because as parents, how many of us came and our parents are like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, right? And that is not what you want to do at all. So it's important to have that conversation, let them know what your expectations of them are, and allow them to engage in a conversation to let you know, okay, this is what I like to do, and then you can have a conversation that will help them to set themselves up for a future, because they may say, well, I don't want to go to college, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, but then you have that realistic conversation like, okay, so how are you going to support yourself? How are you going to establish a foundation for yourself? And it all comes back, I think it all comes back to having an open conversation. Your children should feel safe in telling you what they like, what they don't like, what they're indifferent about, what they're fearful of, what they're excited about. They should be able to have this level of dialogue with you where they feel it's a safe space. And I think too many times parents create this environment where children are not allowed to express themselves. And in doing so, they're leaning towards their peers, they're leaning towards negative influences, or they're looking outside for the support that really should be in house. So we really have to get to that area where we create a safe environment for them to, say how they feel about certain things, say what they want to do. Of course, we're always going to come behind and support and kind of, outline a path for them because we know better, but we have to allow them space to do that.
Agreed. And concerning discipline, you know, if you must use negative discipline, and I've practiced that, sometimes you have to for your child's safety. Like there have been times
Yeah.
when my children were on their cell phones too much, and I had to say, you know what, you're gonna give me your phone. You're having a really hard time uh following the rules with your phone, so I'm gonna take your phone, right? Negative discipline, you know, meaning I'm removing the phone in hopes to improve a certain behaviors of theirs, you know, instead of
Yeah.
me rewarding something to improve the behavior. So it's a negative discipline in a scientific sense. And you know, when we have to practice negative discipline, it's also important for us to, you know, let our children know we love them. You know, especially in the Caribbean community, in the Haitian community. You know what? I'm
Yeah.
doing this, but I still love you. Like I really don't like having to do this. It's very on good. But please don't forget I love you. Mommy
And
loves you.
also,
Daddy
Brian,
loves you.
that it's the action that I don't like, but
Yes, the
you,
action.
Correct.
I love.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
That is
And
so,
and
that is critical. That is
yeah, yeah,
critical.
yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And to explain it in Creole, même si c'est une discipline négative à pratiquer, par exemple, gen fwa petite fille yo sous téléphone yo trop, et puis m'prend téléphone là, bon, mwen li difficile pour ou vle passer toute nuit là sous téléphone nou, sou ma point téléphone là pour ka bien dormi sous ka ban nou, right? Sometimes, gen fwa ou oblige praktike yon discipline négative, tonk ou point téléphone là, pour qu'à encourager petit là pour faire comportement qui est more positive, right? Positive behaviors. Mais même si c'est une practice discipline négative, what faire, lui très important pour ou expliquer petit là, même si m'a fait ça, me remet un pile, oui, right? Pas jamble, me remet un pile, un pile, un pile. Vie passée, une vie qui est très important pour moi. Qu'importe ça m'a fait pour me faire ça. Non, nan kilti haisyen, nou pa telman pale kon sa, nan ap disiplin pitit nou, men li trez important pou pitit nou tout konen, menm si aksyon sa wap fe, li pa yon aksyon ki bon pou, li pa yon aksyon mremen, epi aksyon sa, se sa ki a koz mwen pon fasyon disiplin sa, mwen pon telefon nou, ou fet la ou te vlale, mpap ki te wal nan fet la, même si m'a fait ça, pas oublier, moi remen en pile. Vie ou c'est une vie qui est très important pour moi, right? Qu'importe ça m'te ka fait pour me supporter, c'est ça m'a fait. So c'est pas seulement discipline négative pour offrir petit là, but you know, be emotionally positive with them as well. Build their spirits and nurture them.
And emotionally
Yeah.
present too.
Yes, yes.
Correct. Correct. Yeah,
Mhm.
correct. And not for nothing, understand too that it's not what we say to our children, it's how we say things. And we have to be okay with sometimes taking a break because immediately when they do something that we don't like, our immediate response um sometimes can be very harsh. So it's
Mhm.
knowing when you check out and then come back and revisit the situation so that you're able to kind of think and not just be very reactive to them, because you may meet their unwanted behavior with really too much force, right? And whether that's with your words, with your action. So being able to, you have a partner, maybe tagging your partner in, or just taking a moment to kind of, cool down for a second and come back where you're able to then
Mhm.
communicate, express how
Yeah,
you're feeling.
I need a moment. Just saying I need a moment. Besoin de temps pour me
Yeah,
réfléchir sur ça. N'a
yeah,
vin ça encore. I need a moment to process this, to think about this, and then we're going to have a discussion about this. It's
right,
okay to that you need a moment because you're human too. And another thing
right,
too that is important to show them that you're a human being. You have emotions. It's okay to have emotions.
correct, correct, correct. And on that same line, Clay, you're human and you have emotions, but teaching them the different types of emotion, because for some children and parents, it's one or the other. It's either I'm happy with you or I'm upset or angry with you. But
Yeah,
teaching them there's a range of emotion and
yeah,
helping them to express those emotions in a healthy way. It doesn't always have to be reactive, explosive. It doesn't always have to be that way.
yeah, definitely. And to be able to express them in a healthy way can sometimes save their lives. If
Hmm.
we have the greater culture, how things are,
Right,
um, when to react, when not to react, because
right,
all these things are part of raising healthy human beings. To be able
Agreed.
to thrive in this environment that we're in, because explosive emotion can be dangerous,
it
unfortunately,
can be.
in the
Yeah, it can
environment
be.
that we're living in. But it doesn't mean that you do not have them. You have them. However, you have to be careful how you express them,
Correct.
not to be reactive, because as people within our community, we can be very reactive at times. Our emotions tend to fall on the reactive side sometimes,
Yeah.
and especially in terms of disciplining. So we don't show that range spectrum to our children and how to cope and manage.
Yeah. And when we're talking about coping skills, we have to remember too that we're talking about children, and children do not have they're resilient, but they do not have the toolbox that we have, right? They do not contain or have possess this wealth of knowledge about the world and how to navigate like we do. So it's important that we're able to teach them, okay, if you're upset about something, what are some of the things that you like doing, because that can help you to kind of decompress a little bit. With our children, we have four little ones, all six and below. So as you can imagine, my house is very busy and it's constantly da 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 da. She did this, he did that. They're always going at each other because that's just what siblings do. But it's teaching them you don't respond to um, an unwanted behavior by yelling or screaming, right? What are some other things that you can do? How do what about sitting by yourself for a moment? So I found on Amazon they had this really cool like a series of posters, and the posters talked about there's the ABCs of coping skills. So each letter has like different things that a child can do, and then there's this other poster that talks about like anxiety and different emotions. So they're able to identify their emotion on the board, and we're able to have a conversation about it. And they're able to just be more expressive as opposed to containing all of this anger or frustration and then like just acting out in a way. So it's figuring out different strategies, different mechanisms, and different things to teach them so that they can help to kind of build their coping skills toolbox. It's really important that they know how to do that and they have that.
Hmm. And us building our coping skill toolbox as
Correct.
adults.
Right. Right. And modeling. Modeling is a big one. Modeling.
Agreed.
And I know that we're talking about parenting, and we're talking about, parent child, but equally as important, we have to consider parent-parent relationship, because our children are watching how we engage with one another, how we resolve conflict, how we express our emotions when we're upset. So all of that factors into developing this healthy human being that is going to go on and replicate what's happening in their home. So as parents, we have to be um, mindful how we engage with one another, how we resolve issues, how we parent the child together, making sure that there isn't a split in the household. We're not aligning and we're not, there's so much in raising a human being that, we have to be mindful of. It's a big task and it's not one to be underestimated.
Agreed.
Um, Typically, we would open up the uh, to the audience to see if they have any questions for us. But so far, I don't think we have any questions. So we'll continue with our conversation then. In terms, since we were talking about coping strategies in terms of healthy practices for parents and child.
Yeah.
Now, one thing too, I think that we have to mention it's important to be consistent in the parent-child relationship.
Right. Right.
So, consistent with the rules. And you have to, it's good to discipline and give consequences, but they have to be fair as well. Consequences
Correct.
that are fair because, I mean, children are smart.
They are.
So, so they will pick up on that. It might even question you on that too.
Right.
And it's a really good practice as a parent, being able to admit when you're wrong to
Yes,
your child,
yes.
because
Yeah.
there's no such thing as a
We have an
parent.
issue with that. We do.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I'm gonna tell you, when I first got
Apologize.
a apology from my parent, I was like, "Wow, La Fenèche, it's gonna snow," because I can't believe my
Hmm.
mother was like, "Sorry," like what? But that took years of me working on my mom, quote unquote,
Yeah.
for certain things. And, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. Again, what's acceptable back home may not be acceptable here. And
But
again,
even
this
though, Brian, to raise healthy human beings, it
period.
not be acceptable back home either.
You
Because
know
Yeah.
what? I go far to say it ought not to be, but I'm trying to
But
be
it's the
mindful of
norm.
the DSM-5 where they say if it's culturally appropriate in that
Yeah.
particular area, for us
Yeah.
not to judge it negatively. That's
but
but
we do know the negative impact he can have,
we
regardless.
do know that. We do know that. Yeah, we
So
do.
we can process it from a cultural lens, but in terms of developmental stages, we do know the effect that it can have, regardless of culture. So we have to be mindful of these practices, regardless of
I agree.
But
I
the
agree.
challenge, the challenge is how do you bring about change in a society where that's the norm, right? Because
That's it. Yeah.
yes, but education.
Brian and myself speaking to our respective culture, we're going to be on an island by ourselves. And even you're going to be on an island by yourself because it's not it goes back to what I said. When you know better, you do better. But when you don't, you fall to your old ways, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, and education, and that's
Yeah.
where education comes
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. The education is very important, and like you said, we all know what certain disciplinary practices lead to. But if
Right.
90%, 80 to 90% of the community, this is what they experience, they're not really going to worry much about the different way of being. But that 10% that's educated, quote unquote, about parental practices, that's educated concerning developmental levels, of course they would behave differently, right? It's kind of like once you find out the aluminum leaks from those big pots, you start using different pots, but you have to
Mm,
know that the aluminum leaks from those pots
Yeah.
before you switch it up. You
yeah.
know.
Well, I want to say to some degree. Well, I mean, so I want to say I want to give credit though, because I think we see that there's opportunity for change. I would say even my own, like you said, my own mother. I worked, I worked. Yes, we fall back to old behavior,
Hmm.
but that's where reminders comes in, right?
Yeah.
With that regard, I want to say there's opportunities for change.
They are.
If the willingness is there, though, because they may be upset for setting boundaries and
Yeah.
whatnot, but then after, I've seen a lot of growth, and maybe Ellie, you can
No, I have.
you can
No,
back
I
me up on
have.
that. I've seen a lot of growth.
No, 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 no. No, I agree with you. There definitely is a lot of growth. And, my mother isn't at the point where she's apologizing for anything as of yet, but
Not yet.
but I will say the growth that I've seen in her is she now saying I love you is it rolls off of her tongue. It's something that comes easy to her before, and in the past it was not something that she said, it was something she demonstrated. So today she's demonstrating and she's verbalizing that as well. So there's growth, but that comes with exposure, that comes with knowing better, knowing more, doing more, and also seeing the benefits of it, right? Seeing that it works, seeing that this is not some magical idea that that holds no bearings. It does work. These things are valid.
I I agree. I think there's opportunities. I don't know. Have I don't think. Well, it may be in a roundabout way, the apology, but direct apology. No,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I've experienced that, but in a roundabout way, I guess you could say.
Look, I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you, my mother, she did like what is it, self help, not self help, like the landmark program. Where you go, you learn about yourself, your emotions. So she's actually gone
Mhm.
to conferences. I've spoken to her over the years. So yeah, there are certain practices that she has since apologized for. But again, for a lot of the trauma, I mean, when you're a parent that inflicts trauma upon your child, me giving most parents the benefit of the doubt is done ignorantly. You know, like you don't
Mhm.
realize that this particular disciplinary practice is actually traumatic.
Yes,
And very often you don't realize it because this is what you went through and you're okay. So
hmm,
surely my kids,
yes,
will be okay too. So the educational piece is very important. So to explain it in Creole, li très important pour nous éduquer tête nous qui qualité practice qui pi bon pour jan petit nous ap développer. Peut-être si wap fè un bagay qui pa bon pour stage development petit la dan. Li pa bon pour petit la. We have to act according to the developmental stage. And here's an example of that. Donc, là, gen yon petit qui 4 ans ou 5 ans. Petit la plein activité. They're going to want to move around. You got a 4 or 5 year old, they're going to be full of activity. They're going to want to move around. So, pas gen raison pour neve avec petit la, peut-être yon gros aktivite la fe pou tèt. Sa se yon bagay normal pou yon pitit ki gen 4 an ou 5 an pou yon fe.
pour
Men sa ou... Say that again?
l'actif, s'il pas actif, ou ta doué, ou ta doué
Ton
inquiéter.
conseil, right? Yeah, so, but now let's say the child is being active while crossing
Mhm.
the street. That's when you teach the child, okay, now is not a time to be active. This is
Right.
dangerous, right? Donc, ou
Yes,
sou gen yon pitit ki to active pandan ap travese yon la ri. Se sityasyon sa pou montre pitit la, bon, konya sa pa yon tan pou active ap bouleverse kor, okay? Pou yon machine pa frape yo. So you hold the child's hand and you teach them, but to
Mhm.
but to get upset that they're being active,
Right.
that's an unhealthy practice that can lead to traumatic responses towards the child. Nou pa gen yon rezon pou nou neve avèk yon pitit ki gen 4 an, 6 an, 5 an, pou tèt pitit la to aktiv. Pou tèt sa se yon bagay normal pou yon pitit la sa pou yo aktiv. So it's important that the educational piece, fò nou apwen sa ki normal pou staj devlope, pou staj development pitit nou yo.
yeah. Et puis nous
That is
pas.
such a that is such a valid point, Brian. I want to kind of just reiterate that because sometimes we forget that they're children, we forget that they're teenagers, we forget that they're still learning and growing, and we have this mindset or we have this vision of how they should be, that they should be this perfect child, um, and forget that they're just children, and children will be children. Our jobs as parents is to, is to rally around them and to help to shape them, but not to control them. We set the limits and we have clear expectations, but we have to allow them room for them to kind of figure things out. And we're there as kind of like the caution to say, okay, you don't run because there's cars coming. If you run out, you can get hit by a car, but not to tell them not to be active kids, because kids are active.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And one of the things that I see too, sometimes we may not have known how or parent at a certain age how to use disciplined parenting methods, but this is why we're doing this to open it up, to open up the conversation, to be able to ask for help, to be able to talk about it, so that we're not repeating, we're not machines, um,
Hmm.
automated machine, just functioning and without being fully conscious and aware of our action and being deliberate on how we parent and we move forward with our children.
Agreed.
So we're coming to an end. Um,
Man, this is quick, man. Oh,
I
wow,
know
feels like we're just starting.
Hmm.
that's I don't know. So surprisingly, we don't have questions. Maybe people are more interested in listening in what we have to say, and then maybe at a later time when we revisit this topic at a later time, maybe there will be more questions. But um, final thoughts and as we wrap from both of you in terms of, we have about 9 minutes. Final stuff we may have missed, that you guys feel that are important as part of this discussion around parenting.
I think the only thing that I would kind of add, I would just kind of summarize in saying that, we're raising children, but we're also growing at the same time. And I think we have to allow and provide ourselves with grace and also give that to our children. Understand that our role in their development is to provide support, guardianship, show them the right way to do things. And in doing that, we have to make sure that we're addressing whatever issues and traumas that we may have experienced, and we're open to learning healthier ways to parent our children, not to be closed off or shut off from, learning something new, um, or even going against the norm, the quote unquote norm of our culture, our home country, because sometimes that can be a struggle within itself. Adapting or adapting ways of this culture, the whole country, doesn't mean that you're separated or you are putting away um, your heritage or your culture. It's just growth. And if we can understand that we're all just growing and we offer each other that level of grace and support, I think, you know, it's the foundation to allow better communication, healthier individuals as a whole. To be a good
But
parent, to have a good child, you need to be a good parent.
let's say I'm a brand new parent who understand. I'm becoming aware that the practices that
Mhm.
I'm doing, they're not healthy because they're not giving me the result that I want. So where can I start in terms of change?
Um, well, I would say Google, but everyone may not be tech savvy. But I think finding a community. I think finding other individuals in your community that you live in. I think having that support and having that exposure to others that may be going through the same thing that you're going through, that can offer you guidance and support. I think that's helpful. Um, and I would always encourage people to get with a therapist. Everyone needs a good therapist in their corner because they offer a wealth of experience, and they're also coming from a standpoint of neutrality, so they can provide some insight into some things that others may have very strong opinions on either side. So I would say establish a community, use whatever resources are available that you can access online. But parenting is challenging, but it's not impossible. You have the person that you're trying to groom right in front of you, so engage in a dialogue with that person.
Yeah. Brian?
What I like to send the people off with is to consider that things do change between generations and look at it positively. Don't see it as negatively. See it as a good thing, you know. And I'll give a small example of what I mean in a more positive sense, right? So for my generation, if I liked the music artist, it didn't matter who else liked this artist. If I liked him or her, that's all that mattered, and I would really enjoy their music, right? But with this younger generation, they don't necessarily like the artists unless a whole lot of other people like them, right? So that's their measuring stick for determining, is this artist someone I
Validation.
like, right? Oh, everyone else likes this particular artist, so I like them too, type of thing. And that's a different mindset shift than my generation. You know what I mean? And you know what? That's fine, right? That is totally fine. The world is changing, and we as parents need to be able to embrace the change, educate ourselves on the change, and see how we could be supportive of these generational changes with our children. And to explain it in Creole, li très important pour nous comme parents, pour nous comprendre, génération pa men bagay. Donc, ou génération pa mwen, sou gen yo artiste mizik, même si l'autre moun pa remen artiste sa, si m remen artiste la, se selmen même ki remen li ki important, right? Map suiv artiste la, tant kou misye bien jwe kompa, map toujou suiv misye. Men, jenerasyon jenes yo jodi ya, yo remen yo artiste, pa pou tèt se yo même sel ki remen artiste la, non? Si yon dal lot moun remen artiste la, se konsa pou yo we, bon, sa se yon artiste, mwen do remen tou. So, le regade jan yon chanjman nan panse jenerasyon jenes yo. Sa se yon bagay ki pa negatif. Ou kompon, tonkou, ou met weli tonkou yon bagay pozitif, pou tèt chak jenerasyon gen challenge pa yo, chak jenerasyon gen bagay ki fasil pou yo, gen bagay ki difisil pou yo, e komparan fon nou sipote jenerasyon jenes la, même si yo pas pensé même gens avec nous, même si yo pas choisi bagay même gens avec nous, peut-être c'est yo même cap vini, right? C'est yo même cap vini. So c'est très important pour nous même comme parents, pour nous éduquer tête nous, ça qui pi bon pour génération jeunesse là, pour nous pas mettre petit nous yo dans une situation pour yo souffrir en silence. Ken
Yeah.
importe sa t'arrive petit nous, li très important pour yo connaître, yo ka parler avec nous, pour yo pas souffrir en silence.
Uh, Before we end, we had a quick question. Someone asking pertaining to Haitian Afro-cultural values versus Christian values. Any takers? I have a lot of opinion on this, but we're short on time.
You know what? To keep it simple, they both have their place. Uh, the Christian values, the Afro cultural values have their
Mhm.
place, right? And I'm all for values and practices that promote good mental health. You know,
Yes.
donc you know, pratique culturelle africain avec pratique culturelle chrétien, yo tous les deux gen place pa yo. Mais ça me vle encourager ken n'importe practice qui ka aider petit la lever pour le bien stable dans santé mentale li, pour bien stable dans émotion li. C'est practice ça yo qui pi bon. Mais yo chaque gen place yo.
Yeah. Donc, d'accord avec ça. L'important pour nous pas ignorer culture, it's important for us not to ignore our cultural values because that's a big part of who we are, but it's good to use other tools to enhance because everything has good and I don't even want to say bad, has positive and negative aspect to it. How you implement it and maintaining a balance um, within those practices. But it's very important to be mindful of that, to be mindful of who we are and how we implement those practices because some of those practices are not our own take away our dignity as well. So we have to be mindful of that. So not to promote things that take away our dignity and our ability to parent our children as human beings. So unfortunately we're out of time. Maybe we'll create a topic around that, a symposium around that in terms of cultural practices and parenting. And but vle remercier tout le monde deske nou te la ave nou ta participe pou nou koute emisyon aujourd'hui. Thank you, Eliana. Thank you, Brian, for being here with us to discuss this topic, which is so needed in our community.
Again, problem. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Bom dia,
Yeah,
Venu.
happy Father's Day and enjoy the rest of your days.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
All
you
right.
again. Bye
Take
bye.
care, everybody. Take care.